Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has put Iran on notice. He's promising a harsh response to any strike against Israel.
Netanyahu made the statement at a summit with regional allies to promote economic cooperation and security. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports.
Netanyahu says Israel is watching Iran as its ballistic missile force holds training exercises. He warned that Israel won't tolerate any aggression.
We know that Iran has been doing exercises lately. We're following this, and we're making the necessary preparations. I want to make it clear to Iran here, any action against Israel will be met with a very harsh response.
Let's start with this, because it matters more than people realize. When a country stops whispering threats behind closed doors and starts saying them out loud, on camera, to the world, something has shifted. And that shift just happened. Israel didn't blink, it didn't hedge, it didn't dress it up in diplomatic language. Instead, Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon, looked straight at reporters and said, in plain terms, "We are in high readiness. We are ready with our defensive capabilities, and we're ready with our offensive capabilities. We advise Iran not to test us." Now pause there, because that sentence is not routine posturing. That is a country saying, we can block your punches and we can throw ours at the same time. That's not deterrence language, that's pre-conflict language. And it came just days after Israel's Security Cabinet quietly authorized a new operational framework, Operation Iron Strike, following closed-door discussions between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. So before we even get into missiles, protests, nuclear sites, or regional wars, understand this first truth. Israel is no longer talking about if. It's talking about when and how far. Danny Danon didn't stop at saying Israel was ready. He went further, and this is where the temperature jumped. He said Israel knows exactly where Iran is storing its ballistic missiles. Not guesses, not estimates, not we believe. He said we are aware. That's intelligence language. That's a message sent directly to Tehran. It means your missiles are not hidden. Your tunnels aren't safe. Your storage sites are mapped. Your mobility doesn't protect you anymore. When intelligence is spoken publicly like that, it's not accidental. It's psychological pressure. It's Israel saying, we don't need to warn you privately. We want you to hear this out loud. And then came the sentence that changed everything. An Israeli security official speaking through Channel 12 said, if Iran attacks, there won't be another round. We will act to topple the regime. Let that sink in. That is not retaliation. That is not containment. That is not proportional response. That is regime destruction being named as policy. Israel is saying, if you hit us back, we don't hit you back. We end you. That is an escalation. Israel has never stated this openly before. Here's where people miss the bigger picture. Israel didn't just aim this warning at Tehran. It also sent parallel messages to Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy. Arab diplomats, acting as messengers, reportedly told Hezbollah leadership that if they open a front against Israel, especially during U.S. action against Iran, the consequences would be unprecedented. Translation, no more calibrated responses, no more limited strikes, no more games. And this matters because Hezbollah isn't some fringe militia. They're sitting on around 150,000 rockets aimed at Israel. So when Israel threatens Iran and Hezbollah at the same time, it's not bravado, it's preparation for a multi-front war. That's why the Israeli military says it's on alert for surprise scenarios. That phrase is military code for expect chaos, expect escalation, expect miscalculation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Israel isn't choosing this moment randomly. Iran is facing its worst internal crisis since 1979. Street protests in multiple cities, thousands dead, tens of thousands arrested, internet blackouts, currency collapse, trading at around 1.4 million rials to the dollar. That's not economic strain. That's systemic failure. This is what weakness looks like in real time, and Israel knows it. From a cold strategic standpoint, this is the moment military planners wait decades for, when an adversary is fractured internally, distracted politically, and stretched economically. That doesn't mean Israel caused the protests. In fact, Israel is being very careful not to touch them openly. Why? Because visible Israeli involvement would instantly turn Iranian protesters into foreign agents in the eyes of the regime and crush the movement. So Israel is doing something more calculated. It's threatening from the outside, while waiting to see if Iran collapses from the inside. That's not cruelty. That's strategy. Let's rewind to June 2025. During that 12-day conflict, Israel didn't just strike Iran, it rewrote the battlefield. In the first 24 hours, Israel destroyed more than 40 Iranian air defense systems. That mattered because it opened a corridor, not just for Israeli jets, but for American bombers, to hit key nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan without being intercepted. That's not theory, that happened. Iran responded with missiles and drones. 32 Israelis were killed, and U.S. forces at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar were targeted. Iran proved it could hit back, but Israel proved something more dangerous. Iran cannot protect its skies when Israel decides otherwise. That's the lesson shaping everything now. On January 4th, Iran launched missile and air defense exercises across Tehran, Shiraz, and other cities. They deployed new radar systems, surface-to-air missile units. They called it national deterrence. But Israel sees it for what it is: reconstruction under pressure. Israel destroys defenses. Iran rebuilds. Israel tracks the rebuild. Iran hides. Israel watches. This isn't a standoff. It's a countdown. Netanyahu told Trump during their December 29th meeting that Iran is rebuilding faster than expected. That's the key concern. Trump reportedly responded with a blunt promise: if Iran rebuilds its nuclear program, we will destroy it again. But here's the problem: no one wants to define publicly. What counts as rebuilding? How many centrifuges? How many missile components? How many enriched stockpiles? That ambiguity is dangerous, because ambiguity is how wars start. Israel's military chief said something that should not be ignored. He said Israel is mobilizing tens of thousands of soldiers, preparing across all borders, and that Israel is at a point of no return. That means Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, West Bank, and potentially Iran itself. This isn't fear-mongering, this is logistical reality. If Iran activates Hezbollah, militias in Syria, remnants in Gaza, and allies like the Houthis, Israel is looking at regional fire. And yet Israel is still pressing forward. Why? Because from Israel's perspective, delaying only makes the eventual war worse. Now let's be honest, politics matter too. Netanyahu is under pressure at home, corruption cases, October 7th failures, public anger. And historically, nothing consolidates Israeli political support like an external existential threat. That doesn't mean this is fake, it means it's convenient. Netanyahu has argued for years that Iran cannot be contained, only collapsed. And now, with protests raging inside Iran, he sees a narrow opening, but he's walking a tightrope. Push too hard, Iran rallies nationalist support. Push too soft, Iran rebuilds and strikes later. So Israel threatens loudly and acts carefully. And that brings us to the most dangerous question of all: what happens if Iran decides it has nothing left to lose? Because when regimes feel cornered, they don't retreat, they lash out. Now let's talk about what both sides aren't saying out loud, because this is where the real story lives. On the surface, Israel looks bold, loud, confident, almost daring Iran to make a mistake. But underneath that tough talk, there's anxiety, real anxiety. Because war planning isn't just about who can hit harder, it's about who can survive the second punch. And that's where the balance starts to wobble. Here's the reality both sides are racing against. Israel proved in June 2025 that it can tear open Iranian airspace when it wants. Destroying over 40 air defense systems in the first 24 hours wasn't just a tactical win. It was a statement. It said, your skies are not safe. But wars don't end with statements. They end with endurance. Iran learned from that loss. And since then, it has been rebuilding. Fast. New radar systems. Fresh surface-to-air missile units. Missile production restarted, launch sites repositioned. At the same time, Israel's own defensive systems, Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, took heavy usage during the June war. Missile defenses aren't magic shields. They require reloads, repairs, recalibration, and time. So now you have a paradox. Iran is rebuilding offensive capability. Israel is rebuilding defensive capability. And whoever finishes first gains leverage. This is where the narrative cracks. Behind closed doors, Netanyahu reportedly asked Trump not to bomb Iran on January 14th. Why? Because Israel wasn't fully ready to absorb the retaliation. That's not weakness, that's honesty. Israel wants Iran hit. Badly, but not before Israeli defenses are fully restored. And that creates a contradiction you can't ignore. Publicly, Israel threatens unprecedented force. Privately, Israel asks for patience. Publicly, don't test us. Privately, not yet. That's the tension driving this entire moment. It explains the loud warnings and the delayed action. It explains the urgency and the hesitation. Now, layer in Iran's internal crisis. Protests across cities, mass arrests, internet shutdowns, economic collapse. From Israel's perspective, this is the moment they've been waiting decades for. But moments don't last forever. If the Iranian regime crushes the protests brutally and decisively, the window closes. And if Israel waits too long, Iran emerges angrier, more paranoid, and more militarized than before. That's why early 2026 keeps coming up in intelligence circles, not because it's inevitable, but because it's plausible. The drivers are all still active. Nuclear uncertainty, missile rebuilding, proxy networks on edge, domestic political pressure on Netanyahu, strategic ambiguity from Washington. The path hasn't been chosen yet, but it's been cleared. Now let's talk about Trump. Trump told Netanyahu that if strikes are ordered, the US will support them. That's the reassurance Israel needs. But Trump also wants something else: leverage. He wants Iran guessing. One day it's diplomacy, the next day it's threats, the next day it's silence. Trump's approach isn't confusion, it's pressure. He wants Tehran unsure whether the next move is a deal or a bomb, and that uncertainty is intentional. But here's the catch: Israel believes the US doesn't yet have enough assets in the region for a full regime collapse operation. Carrier groups are still moving, forces are still positioning, logistics still catching up. That's why action hasn't happened yet. You may have noticed something else. Israeli ministers were reprimanded for speaking too openly about toppling the Iranian regime. Only Netanyahu is allowed to speak on it. That tells you how delicate this moment is. Loose words can start wars. Careless statements can force hands. Netanyahu wants control over timing, tone, and escalation. Because once this starts, it won't be clean. Here's the nightmare scenario nobody wants, but everyone is preparing for. Iran gets hit. Iran retaliates. Hezbollah opens fire. Syria ignites. Gaza flares. Shipping lanes get hit. US bases come under attack. And suddenly, this isn't an Israel-Iran conflict. It's a regional firestorm. And here's the darkest irony. Neither Israel nor Iran actually wants that war. Israel wants deterrence, or collapse without a fight. Iran wants survival, or leverage without humiliation. But escalation spirals don't care about intentions. They care about momentum. A former Israeli national security official said something chilling. Iran may be rebuilding missiles faster than Israel is rebuilding defenses. That means time isn't neutral. Every week that passes changes the balance. Every delay carries risk. That's why the warnings sound sharper now. That's why the threats feel final. And that's why this story isn't slowing down. It's accelerating. Let's strip it down. Israel has issued its strongest warning to Iran in decades. Regime change has been named openly as a consequence. Iran is rebuilding militarily while cracking down internally. The US is preparing, but not fully ready. Protests create opportunity, but also urgency. Both sides fear the consequences, yet continue preparing. This is what an escalation spiral looks like before it breaks. And the most dangerous moment in geopolitics isn't when war begins. It's when everyone believes they still have time until they don't. The threats are real. The intelligence is real. The preparations are real. What's not yet decided is whether those threats are meant to prevent war or prepare the ground for it. And that decision may come sooner than anyone is ready for. This story is still unfolding, and it affects far more than just Israel and Iran. So I want to hear from you. Do you think these threats are meant to deter war, or are we watching the early stages of something much bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this analysis valuable, support the work by liking the video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you stay updated as this situation continues to develop. Because this story isn't over, not even close.